Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Steven Universe Retrospectives, and today we're going to be discussing episodes 87 and 88 of Steven Universe, Too Short to Ride, and The New Lars. And since we're now back to regular misadventures, well, we're just going to have to go over everything episode by episode. And of course, odd numbered episode first, Too Short to Ride. Now this one's actually a Peridot episode, and in this episode, Steven and Amethyst want to hang out with Peridot. Pretty much what's going on is that Steven and Amethyst have planned a day at Funland, and they want Peridot to come with them. Though before they go, Steven gives Peridot a tablet because apparently Steven's dad bought it with all of his new moolah, but he decided to get rid of it because, in his own words, oversaturation of media is a plague on one's mind. So Steven gave it to Peridot. She tricked it out with some of Steven's Velcro bands so that she could wear it on her wrist. And they asked her to go with, and so Steven and Amethyst asked her if she wanted to go with them, and she said yes, because that's a thing that friends do. As such, they go to Funland, and for the most part, it's clear Peridot has no idea what the social convention is or having fun with friends is, but Steven and Amethyst try to talk her into doing what they think is the most fun thing at Funland first, i.e. riding the roller coaster. Unfortunately, though, all three of them are, too short to ride. And while Peridot does throw a tantrum over it, especially since how it was determined that she was too short to ride was when someone actually tested her height, because technically her triangle hair did make her look kind of tall enough. Essentially, Steven and Amethyst think about a good workaround for this is if they shapeshifted a little, with Steven stretching out his legs and Amethyst just shapeshifting to look like a taller person. However, when Peridot seems to try it, nothing really happens. And while Steven and Amethyst ask her if something's wrong, she says, no, it's fine, I'm just out of practice. You guys go ahead and have fun, I'll just wait for you. As such, Steven and Amethyst ride the roller coaster while Peridot stays off, and they continue trying to go around Funland goofing off, even going to a Hall of Mirrors and continuing to use shapeshifting to mess around, but again, Peridot's kind of the odd one out, as she doesn't seem to be shapeshifting at all, and seems to be a little miserable, to the point where when everyone's talking about how much fun they're having, she actually types in the search engine on her pad, "Am I having fun?" However, as they're passing through one of those game stalls, or a ring toss stall, she ends up seeing a prize that actually catches her eye. This big stuffed alien plush that immediately upon seeing it, she just wants. And so she wants to play the game, and we get this honestly funny image where when they call the attendant, Mr. Smiley runs over, and it turns out he's running Funland all by himself, which leads to a kind of darkly funny scene where Steven says, "Oh, he says he's understaffed." Steven laughs, and Lars is like, "I'm glad you see the humor in it. I haven't seen a bed in 6 days." It's kind of dark, but I love it. And so Steven, as such, Peridot tries playing the ring toss, but fails. And so Steven and Amethyst try helping her, but none of them can actually get any of the rings on the bottles. As such, Amethyst, to try and give Peridot an edge, distracts Mr. Smiley by saying that Amethyst tries to distract Mr. Smiley by saying that Onion's trying to light the roller coaster on fire, and while at first he doesn't believe it, he actually is trying to light the roller coaster on fire. So while Mr. Smiley goes to deal with that, Amethyst uses her shape-shifting powers to stretch one of her arms and get a ring on a bottle. As such, by the time Mr. Smiley comes back, Amethyst claims that Peridot made this thing, and so that means that she's entitled to a prize. A little alien thing that you put on your finger. Of course, Peridot's like, "No, I want the big one." But Mr. Smiley said, no, if you want that, you gotta get at least 10 rings. And yeah, as such, the trio end up leaving kind of disappointed, and Peridot is just kind of gloomy, and Peridot's just kind of gloomy, and even starts then, they say, at least the thing that Peridot won is good, and Peridot says, no, the thing Amethyst won with her shape-shifting. At which point, Amethyst finally asks what her problem is with shape-shifting, and while she tries deflecting and saying that she doesn't like doing it because it's against the body's natural form, Amethyst finally keeps digging, and Peridot reveals she can't shapeshift. And while at first Steven and Amethyst think that she means that she just doesn't know how to, even offering to help her out, which leads to some nice little things which even leads to the callback to the Cat Fingers episode, Peridot reveals she does not. It's not that she doesn't know how to shapeshift. She can't. She can't shapeshift. She's physically incapable of it. Apparently, newer gems on Homeworld are lacking in certain abilities that older gems have, mostly because the resources on the homeworld are dwindling, and as a result, newer gems can't do stuff like shapeshifting like the crystal gems can. And as a result, and which is part of why why Peridot had her limb enhancers, because she had no extra powers. So as a result, she's just kind of basic, so to speak. Amethyst immediately tries to take this as an opportunity to try and talk with Peridot, saying, "Look, I don't look. All this time you're focusing on what you think you need to be, but we don't love you for that. We love you for who you are," which is pretty much Amethyst trying to have a serious conversation with her, which you can tell is based on Amethyst's own experience and her own body image issues. But as Amethyst is trying to talk to her, Peridot just ignores her and just starts typing clods over and over and over on her tablet, on their equivalent of Twitter. As such, Amethyst gets annoyed that Peridot's just pretty much ignoring her, and finally decides, you know what, you think you need... And so, okay, just give me this thing, and she tries taking her tablet away, and this is what kind of gets Peridot to freak out. It's like, no, I need this. And Amethyst is like, no, you don't need this. Peridot's like, no, you don't know that, but Amethyst eventually does manage to get it out of Peridot's hands, and to try and get Peridot to finally focus. Amethyst tries throwing it into the ocean, and Peridot just freaks out. It's like, no, it's all I have, and points her arms at it, and it just floats there. Yep, it turns out the good old Perry Dorito has metal powers, as they call it. Essentially, as we later learn in the series, this allows her to control anything metal, which, honestly, if you think about it, kind of makes her a very dangerous foe if she learned to use these powers properly. But put simply, with these powers, she's able to swoop, she's able to get the tablet to come in closer, while Steven is gawking at how awesome this is. Peridot's just she's just kind of shocked by it. Like, the whole time she's doing it, she's clearly confused by it, but when she finally does get the hang of it, she knows exactly what she wants to do with it. And we then cut back to the ring toss, as while Mr. Smiley is asleep because, as we said, he's the only one running Funland, Peridot's able to get 10 rings on the bottles, and so when she wakes him up saying, "Hey, look, I did it," he gives her the prize, the giant alien plush. As such, the episode ends with Steven Amethyst very much celebrating Peridot and all of her celebrations, saying, "Peridot, give it up." It's like, "Give it up for the Peapod," and Peridot says, "No, give it up for the Shorty Squad," which for context they called themselves the Shorty Squad throughout this episode. So yeah, that was cute. But that one out of the way, let's now talk about the next one, the new Lars. And if the title of the episode is anything to go by, we obviously know which character this one's gonna be focused on. That's right, Petey. Okay, yeah, no. It really is focusing on Lars, and the episode actually opens with Steven at the Big Donut, trying to kind of ask Sadie and Lars what their preferred hanging out and doing nothing animal is, the sloth or the koala. And pretty much Lars is being his typical douchey self and just wanting to write this off, while Sadie's just trying to go to him and says, "Oh, come on, let him have this." But pretty much Lars just doesn't want to deal with this, especially since the next day he and Sadie aren't going to be in work. Yeah, apparently they have the day off because the Big Donut's going to be closed, because apparently they're fumigating the air vent system, because apparently there are dead seagulls in there. Don't know when that happened, but whatever. Also, minor thing, but how did Sadie get a scar under her eye? I probably saw this earlier, but could someone remind me where that happened? Because she has a scar under her eye. Oh, the island. Never mind. Forget what I said. Anyway, yeah. Sadie thinks that, well, if they have the day off the next day, well, maybe she and Lars could hang out, watch some movies together. But Lars just kind of blows her off and says he wants to go hang out with Buck Dewey. Of course, Sadie gets annoyed at this and annoyed that she even bothered asking. But Steven being Steven, he's still shipping them hard. And even as Lars and Steven end up leaving with Lars locking up, Steven says, "Well, why don't you just confess your feelings to Sadie? Why don't you just tell her you love her?" And Lars pretty much tells Steven to back the hell off and mind his own business before just storming off. And Steven, of course, is just distraught that Lars is just denying his feelings to the point where that evening, as he got... Sorry, hearing something right now. pretty much as Steven's lamenting, pretty much Steven's affected so much that night he begins talking about Lars in his sleep, and in Steven's dream he sees Lars, and he tries to once again talk to him and say, well, why don't you just confess your feelings? But little by little, as in the dream, he starts floating closer and closer to Lars, and as he gets close, he freaks out, and the Lars image that he sees freaks out, and when Steven flies into him, he just awakes suddenly, only he's not in his room at the temple. In fact, he's in Lars's room, in Lars's body. Yep, Steven's pretty much since Steven had Lars on his mind so much, he unintentionally wound up using his psychic, empathic, mental, whatever powers to pretty much throw his mind into Lars's body. And of course, he's just kind of freaking out about this, especially since he wakes up naked. But he does pretty much decide to roll with it and try to respect Lars's body while he's in it, as he gets dressed and goes downstairs, and well, he ends up running into Lars's parents, who want to have a talk with Lars about his grades. But Steven, being Steven, when he sees this and he hears Lars's parents being concerned about how they let him move into the attic, they want him to just put more effort into everything, he just says, wow, you guys are really nice. I promise you I'm going to be the best son I could ever be. And Lars's parents are just okay with this, that they're thinking, oh, he's really being a good boy today. And sure enough, after Steven has his outburst, or not an outburst, he ends up going on to Beach City, just kind of singing about how he's Lars. And at one point, he even says, "Hey, Onion, look, I'm Lars." When he runs into Onion, and Onion's actually freaked out, which means that if Onion's freaked out, something's not right. However, he ends up running into Buck, Dewey, Sour Cream, and what was her name? Jenny. I keep forgetting her name. Sorry. And Jenny. And pretty much he still gives him the same shtick about how he likes hanging out with them, though it's clear that the teenagers are annoyed by having Lars there at all, as when Jenny sees him, she's just like, oh, hey, Lars. Like, it's clear that they're kind of annoyed with his shtick, too. But Steven, being Steven, asked them about about their favorite lazy time animal, and they say, well, I think we're more like wild jaguars. And so Steven says, I think I'm like a panther. And pretty much he just starts doing all the things that Steven would normally do, being nice. When Jenny talks about how she was forced to work in her dad's restaurant that day and how she smells, Steven says that she smells nice, and since they all think this is Lars, they start thinking, oh, maybe this isn't the Lars we all know. Maybe it turns out that Lars is a pretty cool guy. And they even offer him a chance to join their breakdancing team. Because they're going to be going to a competition. Which, at first, Steven's all for, but then he thinks, no, actually, there's a place I need to go to. And so he ends up running off and going to meet with Sadie. And of course, and pretty much Steven's just all excited because he's gonna get Sadie and Lars to hang out. But when he knocks on Sadie's door and she comes to answer in a bathrobe, which obviously she was just lounging around all day, she's less than pleased to see him, which makes sense considering that Lars pretty much blew her off the day prior. But Steven is still trying to push it and say, look, come on, let's just hang out. Come on, let's hang out. I want to be with you, and so forth. And while Sadie's kind of annoyed, eventually she's like, well, okay, let's just go hang out. And so they go downstairs, and she ends up showing, and pretty much she lets him pick between all these horror movies, which he picks one called Fangs of Love, which is supposed to be a love story of werewolves. And Sadie thinks it's a cheesy one, but Steven, being Steven, he loves the smolts. But once the movie's over, Sadie's a little emotional. Like, she thinks that something's up with Lars, so to speak. And something's clearly up. Like, just what's going on with him. Like, which Steven says that I think Steven tries blowing off, but pretty much Sadie is still not buying it. As even she says, "Look, I know how you feel about me. I know, like, you're like two different people. Like in private, you're different, two different people in private and in public, and it makes me think you're embarrassed to be around me. Just like, what do you really think of me?" Which is a nice little moment, and Steven, being the one that keeps shipping Lars and Sadie, just yells out that he loves her! And Sadie thinks that he is full of it, to the point where he's saying, oh, really? Is that... So really, that's really what it's going to be about? And like, if you just act all sweet and kind, have the little hearts in the ears, because Steven put the, like, heart piercings in his ears. in his ears and had to watch the movie. He's like, "Oh, you think you do all that? Suddenly I'm just gonna fold for you?" And Steven's just like, he's freaking out because he doesn't know what the hell's going on. And when he says, "Look, I just wanted to say how I really felt," Sadie just tells him to get out. At which point she forces him out, and while Steven's like, "No, no, no, wait, come on, Sadie, please," she's just not having it and just is angry with him. And so Steven, realizing he pretty much effed up, ends up saying, look, just yells out, "I'm not Lars." At which point Sadie, kind of confused, like, what? And Steven finally admits that he's actually Steven in... Sorry, still hearing stuff. He admits that... Steven admits that he's actually Steven in Lars's body, and that he woke up there the whole day, and he apologizes for essentially dropping the ball this bad, as he pretty much... he thought he wanted to try and bring Lars and Sadie closer together, and all it really did was just push more of a wedge between them, and he apologizes for that. Which is what prompts Sadie to open the door back to her house and believe his story, because apparently Lars would never apologize. However, once Sadie realizes that it's been Steven that she's been hanging out with, she asks a very good question. Wait, if you're in Lars's body, does that mean he's in your body? And Steven's like, I don't know. And Sadie's, of course, that's like, shouldn't you have checked on that? And with that revelation, she and Steven just bolt back to his house. And as they're running around, they end up running into all the people that Steven encountered while in Lars's body, the teenagers, his parents, who see them all running around and who decide to follow them for some reason. And at which point, when Steven and Sadie get back to Steven's house, well, the door is locked, so they just eventually bust the door down, which makes it look like they're breaking and entering. And so when Steven and Sadie go inside, they see Steven's body just still lying in bed, resting. And so Steven runs up to his body and just starts trying to smack it awake while everyone walks in because they want to know what the hell's going on. But ultimately Steven managed to finally get a good smack in, which does wake him up back into his body. But the instant his mind is back in its proper place, Lars's body seems to kind of go out as he starts drooling, his eyes roll back into his head, and he almost passes out. And when it wakes back up, Lars is back in the driver's seat and has absolutely no idea what the hell's going on. As such, when everybody's there, of course, that makes it look like they think that Lars just assaulted Steven for no reason. And so when Lars asks for clarification, Steven admits that he spent the whole day in Lars's body. Which I don't know why no one else hears that, because Lars clearly hears it, and there were a bunch of people, and there were the teenagers between Steven and Lars when Steven admitted it. And so, but when Lars learns that that he lost the whole day because Steven was in his body, well, he just starts freaking out when people say, "Look, just chill. You weren't like this earlier." He's like, wait. I was actually weird all day, and all of you just liked it." At which point Lars takes a moment, breathes in, and then screams at the top of his lungs. Which, yeah, I think that's a justifiable response. As such, we then cut to the next day as Steven goes into the Big Donut now that it's open. Lars is still kind of dealing with the fallout from everything, and while Steven tries to apologize, even tries giving him a card, Lars just rips it up and drops it. As such, Steven tries to further apologize and talk about what happened with Sadie, and when Lars hears that Steven did something with Sadie, he is like, "Well, what'd you do there?" And he says, "I told her that you loved her." And when Lars immediately just starts losing it too, Steven responds with, "Look, it's okay, she didn't buy it. She thinks that the only reason that you would say something to her is if you were trying to hurt her." And Lars thinks, yeah, that makes sense. It does, but it does also get to Lars a little that apparently nobody else saw the change, and that everyone just when everyone saw him acting differently, they all preferred that Lars over the one they know. But Steven does admit that out of everyone, there was still one person who that liked the original more. At which point Sadie comes in and Lars goes up to her, and they just kind of talk about how crazy a day it was yesterday. And at which point Lars does offer Sadie to come over and they can just hang out and goof off. And the episode ends with them both agreeing to it and just kind of sharing a laugh. So it's nice. I like it. So there you go. Alright, so thoughts on the episode. So first, let's talk about Too Short to Ride. And Too Short to Ride, I think, is a nice little, is actually another little nice character episode. In this case, it's nice to peek back in with Peridot now that she's one of the good guys, because when you have like a redemption arc, it does make you, when you do have a redemption arc for a villain, it does make you wonder, well, where can you go with the villain after they become one of the good guys? And with Peridot, she did have a good arc towards her redemption, but there is still, but when after that, it does make you wonder what they're going to do with her afterwards. Well, put simply, it's adapting. In this case, we see that now that Peridot's one of the good guys and is now a part of the Crystal Gems, she's still having issues with fitting in, especially with her status as a gem. Excuse me one sec. Dog wanted out. Anyway, like I was saying, it's clear that she's still having issues. And case in point, we are kind of seeing, in this episode, we not only see her trying to fit in and be friends with the Crystal Gems, especially when she wants to hang out with Steven and Amethyst, but doesn't really know the social conventions of hanging out, so to speak. But we also kind of see some of her issues that most likely carried over from when she was allied with Homeworld. Namely, she has to kind of deal with the fact that she's objectively worse than the gems. Like, ability wise, she can do a lot with what she has. She's super intelligent, can use that intelligence to create incredible machines that can do amazing things. But in her base form, she's powerless. Yes, she can take heavy amounts of damage and then get poofed, so there's that, but all gems can do that. For her, she has nothing. And so throughout the episode, you can see her trying to play it off, and it clearly and it's clear that she's insecure about the fact that she can't do the things that Steven and Amethyst can do. Because for them, this stuff is simple. It's as easy as breathing. Well, for Amethyst it is. Steven, it took time to learn. But put simply, for them, these are just things that they can normally do as gems. But whereas with Peridot, she can't. She's weak. She can't do these things. And so when she's presented with something that she is objectively worse at, it's clear that it gets to her a little. It clearly puts a dent in her ego. And while she tries to write it off and say, no, it's fine, you guys just go ahead and have fun, throughout the episode, it's clear that it's having an effect on her, especially when Steven and Amethyst start flaunting more of their shape-shifting, and she's just kind of left on the sidelines, just kind of feeling inferior. And as such, when Amethyst does finally confront her and say, look, what's your problem with shape-shifting, she just finally admits, I can't do it. And as a result, you do kind of see more of how Peridot views herself in comparison to other gems. Specifically because she's ultimately, like Amethyst said, she was focusing more on the things that she couldn't do. After all, we've established that Peridot is pretty haughty and high and full of herself. She is arrogance incarnate. She has to be the best at things. It's why she says that she's the leader of the Crystal Gems, even though she's just a Peridot. She is a capable gem. She can do a lot. But the thing is, there are some things that she lacks in. And sadly, when she is lacking, it's clear that it gets to her something fierce. Not in the same way that it would the other gems, but in a way that kind of brings out her negative side. She gets a bit more snippy, standoffish. She starts ignoring people when they try to give her advice, and she just tries retreating into her own little world and just tries closing herself off. And likewise, we do see that in this episode, as when Amethyst does try confronting her about this, when she finally just says, look, it's an objective fact, I can't do this. Amethyst tries giving her a pep talk saying, look, you've been focusing on what you can't do, but we love you for who you were, for what you can. And what does she do? She just looks at her tablet and types clods over and over and over because she just does not want to hear it. She's just like, oh, what? Essentially, she's just going, well, what do you know? You're not me. Which, I can kind of understand that mindset, but at the same time, it's a nice big F you when a friend is trying to give you legitimate advice. But what makes it better, what ultimately helps is that by the end of the episode, it's because of these friends that she was able to discover something new about herself. Because of Steven and Amethyst pushing her to try and discover new things about her and focus on what she can do, she discovers an ability that she didn't know about prior. And when she discovers the power, she's in shock, like, whoa. Like, I can actually do this? And so when she starts learning to control the power, first thing she does is that she uses it to advance in areas that she was lacking in before. She goes back to the ring toss to win that big stuffed to win the big stuffed alien. It's it's honestly nice. And when the final thing in the episode is Amethyst trying to give her all the credit, instead she says no, give it up for us, because it's because of Steven and Amethyst that she discovered this ability. And as a result, it's a nice little message to kind of talk more about instead of trying to focus on what you can't do, try to instead focus on what you can. And when you try and focus on that, you might discover something about yourself that you never even knew about. And that's what we see in this episode, as Paradox throughout the whole episode is lamenting the fact that she can't shapeshift like Steven and Amethyst can, but when she does, but when Steven and Amethyst kind of help her out and help her realize more things about herself, she discovers something new, and it's because she had friends who helped her find it out, which is nice. It's really cool, and it helps further along the dynamics between the group. It helps bring them closer together as friends. It helps expand more on Paradox's character. It's just really nice. Add on some honestly really funny moments, like the jokes of Mr. Smiley, with the scene where Amethyst distracted Mr. Smiley with Onion. I'm not kidding. That made me laugh out loud. Just when she said, "Hey, Mr. Smiley, look, Onion's trying to set the roller coaster on fire." I was like, "Oh, I'm not buying that again." He looks over, no, he's trying to set the roller coaster on fire. It was just good timing on Amethyst's part. That was when he was doing it. It's hilarious. It's just overall, it's honestly a fun episode. A fun and sweet episode, so there you go. As for the new Lars, this episode, in my opinion, it's perfect. It's fine. It ranges from fine to pretty good for me. In some regards, what kind of holds it into the fine areas that it's kind of a Lars focused episode, and like I said, those episodes typically have a similar theme to them. Lars needs to learn to not live in his own head, to get it out, to pretty much just get that stick out of his ass and learn to be a better person, and so on and so forth. And as we've established, Lars has to keep learning that lesson over and over and over until it finally sinks in. And unfortunately, this episode is kind of that same brand of having to hammer that lesson in. But with that being said, it does have some amusing stuff, and it does kind of further the whole Lars and Sadie relationship thing. While in my opinion the episode does still further showcase why I don't think they could work as a couple, as while they do have their own sweet moments, it's like Haley said once, really their whole romantic relationship is just something that Steven is pushing on them, because he does see those little bits of chemistry in there, and he thinks that translates to full-on romance. But really, that's just all they are. Little moments. In reality, as we showcase, Lars and Sadie are not a good match. Romantically. As friends, I can see them working. They really do work as friends, but I don't see anything beyond that. But as such, and pretty much it's showcased in the beginning of the episode, as while they both kind of crack a joke at some. Well, they do kind of crack a joke at Steven's expense. They do have different reactions to him and his whole comparison of sloths and koalas. Whereas Lars just wants the whole thing to get over with, while Sadie's like, "Oh, come on, let him have this." It's two differing demeanors to the situation, and while you can see how they click, in other ways they're also different, especially with Sadie, especially since Sadie can be very emotional and Lars can be emotionally tone deaf. So yeah, you can kind of see why they wouldn't fit together. But I think what makes the episode work is that it also showcases the strength of their friendship in that regard. Because throughout the episode, when Steven is in Lars's body and just going around doing all the things he would typically do as himself, but as Lars, everybody else is like, "Oh, wow, I guess Lars really is a cool guy." But it's Sadie who realizes that something's off with him. When he starts acting nice and chipper and saying he loves her, she immediately thinks, "Okay, what are you on?" And she immediately just thinks, "What is up with you?" And so, as such, it kind of helps show, and even in the end of the episode, when Lars laments that everyone preferred Steven in his body rather than himself as himself, well, Steven says there was one person who preferred the old you, and you saw that was Sadie, which I think is a nice little message to showcase, because it showcases that Lars and Sadie, despite how they clash, are friends, and ultimately, for all their ups and downs, they both know each other. And while they can unintentionally hurt each other without realizing it at times, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, they are friends because they know each other so well. They are friends because of that chemistry. And you can see that in the episode. Sadie talks about how she knows because Sadie in the episode talks about how she sees the way Lars acts when it's just when other people are around. That in private they can be nice, but in public he acts like a jerk to her because she knows him and she knows that he's embarrassed to be around her. Which, yeah, it's a dick move in that part. But the thing is, when he tries to reassure her, no, I care about you, that's when she says, okay, what are you on? Like, I feel like that if Lars had tried to get defensive in that point, then at that point she would have known that something was up, or she probably would have just gotten upset with him, or maybe Lars could have been like, oh, I don't know, man, I just don't understand it. I feel like at that point she probably would have just gone side and gone whatever, and they would have just gone back to doing their thing. In fact, which I think helps showcase that, especially which I think would have been how the relationship would have been fleshed out. Although in the case, what caused that bit of tumultuousness in that episode was when Lars came over in the first place. So yeah, I guess all the roots in the episode kind of came from Steven. But overall, though, it does showcase the strength of their friendship that she does know him that well. Again, it still showcases that there is still enough toxicity in there that they do not work as a couple, because he is the one that blew her off, and the fact that she knows that he's embarrassed to be around her, yeah, that's not good boyfriend material right there. That's just kind of a nice bit of FU right there. And if I ever had a partner that was embarrassed to be around me, at that point I'd be like, okay, fuck you. So, yeah. Overall, and on top of that, we do get some nice little. It is kind of funny to see Steven in Lars's body. Lars's voice actor does a great job at translating Steven's typical excited giddiness into Lars. And when he does, and as well as getting Steven's kind of toned, pretty much Steven's social awkwardness in some regards, especially when Sadie questions like, "Wait, you never checked to see if Lars is in your body?" And he's like, "I don't know." So I do like that. It is nice, and it does have some kind of amusing antics, especially when everybody that Steven interacted with in Lars's body sees him pretty much slapping Steven awake. It's funny. Overall, like I said, the episode kind of ranges from fine to just from. I think the episode is fine to okay. Actually, yes, I'm changing my opinion there, but it's just when I think it over. It ranges from fine to okay to me. It kind of goes in that range because once again it's a Lars episode, and it does kind of help showcase more why Lars is kind of a toxic person and why he and Sadie really wouldn't work as a couple. But at the same time, it does have some nice things in there with Steven and Lars's body. It does have some nice things in there with Lars kind of once more reflecting on how much of a jerk he is, and in the case of his friendship with Sadie, it does showcase how strong their friendship really is. That out of everyone there, it's Sadie that notices that something was wrong with him and starts getting uneasy when he starts acting different. So I think that's fine. Again, it's not a great episode. Still has the typical Lars episode problems, which, like I said, includes him being a dickwad for no reason and being a dickwad. But overall, it's okay to fine. It's okay to fine. I don't hate it, but it's still rife with problems. So, yeah, overall, I think that's about it. Too Short to Ride, I think, was a pretty good episode that focused on some nice character stuff with Peridot and her relationship with the gems. The new Lars is ultimately fine with some interesting stuff with seeing Steven and Lars's body, and also kind of talking about the stuff with Sadie and Lars, but ultimately is held back by, once again, toxic relationships, Lars being a dick, and kind of talking about and just kind of him having to lament and him once again having to continually learn the lesson of maybe I shouldn't be a dick. So whatever. Either way, we got a pretty good episode too, an alright-ish episode. So yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and if you're just here for my Steven Universe vlogs, then I hope to see you next week. Take care.